So today's webinar will be on pipe networks, and just a note about the focus of this. It's common use of pipe networks and touching on some fundamental customization and configuration, some tips and tricks in that area. So in a half hour, 45 minutes, we're going to have time for in-depth part builder customizations, though we will dabble in there a little bit, some common tweaks here and there. And the skill level of this is maybe intermediate to maybe even novice. So we'll start out with kind of some basic use, some common use of pipe networks. Perhaps there's a few tools there. Some of you have missed over the years. Those of you who have used these tools longer. So just a small agenda. We're going to start with an intro for practical use of pipe networks. From there, that will lead into some parts catalog modifications. So we'll jump into part builder for that. And we'll kind of do that on the fly. We'll see kind of odd things that show up. We'll be starting with an out-of-the-box catalog and talk about common ways to kind of manage that stuff. And what we'll find is a lot of that stuff ties back to the catalog itself. And we'll define what that is a little more as well. We'll get into parts list setup. That's basically the link between your catalog and what you're drawing on the screen. We'll talk about some tweaks and customization there, including rule sets and QTO Manager. We'll touch on part mapping with storm and sanitary analysis. So that's Autodesk SSA. That's the analysis pipe sizing program and pond sizing program, for example. We're not going to spend any time in there and how to use that application, but we'll make sure you're aware of the part mapping that's required to do that round tripping, and it's really a very nice process to round trip through storm and sanitary analysis. So a lot of folks use HydroCAD for this these days, or perhaps an Excel spreadsheet. Storm and sanitary analysis is something that comes free with Civil 3D, so if you're looking at perhaps including that application, it's there for you to check out. I'm going to turn off my Snagit. There we go. And finally, we'll touch on staking pipe networks. How do you go about staking them? There'll be a couple options there. So first thing, practical use. So we're going to touch on designing with pipe networks. And we're not going to spend a ton of time fine-tuning it, but we're going to put in a pipe network, a storm network, and perhaps a sanitary network. And we're going to talk about a few concepts, including flow direction. Okay, this is the direction you're dropping parts and pipes into the drawing. You get a choice on flow direction, and the pipes themselves have a property, and that is flow direction, and they default a certain way. We'll talk about parts swapping. You dropped in a storm manhole, you wanted a catch basin instead. How do you swap that, and what's implied with that? It's a very powerful tool, and it should be used in any kind of modifications in your pipe network that you're creating. So we'll talk some about that. We'll talk about renumbering and renaming. Again, this is a tool. It's very powerful, but it requires certain setup. Parts list, parts catalog have to be set up in a certain way to enable this tool to work well. And I see a lot of firms use this well. Other times, firms, it doesn't quite work for them. They might have some real specifics about how things need to be labeled or how they appear, and it doesn't work. And so we'll talk about some of those ramifications as well. We'll touch on object layers, and then just some tips and tricks about editing slopes and inverts. There's a number of ways to do it. It's not always the most straightforward which one to choose. They kind of have their pros and cons, and so we'll talk about 2 or 3 different ways to be modifying your actual design. Finally, we'll throw that pipe network into a profile view, and so we'll discuss a pipe network alignment as well as a profile, and we'll discuss a couple topics including sump and crossing pipes. A few styles tweaks we'll look at there and how to handle that. So let me jump into Civil 3D, and I'm working in Civil 3D 2015. Fairly recently it came out. A lot of great new features in it. There's actually a ton of AutoCAD graphics enhancements. Those of you who might be wondering what's performance like, graphically it's a little slower, but otherwise it seems to be about the same. So you'll notice it's got a nice charcoal interface. You can go back to that gray interface if you like, but I don't know, I kind of like this new interface. So we're going to throw a pipe network in here, and we're just going to drop in some manholes and some catch basins, and we'll kind of talk about things as we go. So like I had said, this is a fairly out-of-the-box setup, and we'll kind of tweak things and modify things as we go along, pointing out a few different tips and tricks along the way. So I'm going to start with pipe network creation tools, and we're going to create a storm network. And when I do this, what happens? Well, this lands on a certain layer, right? It lands on these layers, okay? There's something to point out here, and that is the object layers, okay? When you create pipes and structures, they land on certain layers, and those are defined in your object layers. So if I go up here to drawing settings, I have my object layers. Now, pipe networks are one that I'm a big fan of turning on the wildcard here. So this is the modifier where I say add a suffix and putting in dash asterisk. The wildcard there is the asterisks, and down here it means include the name of the object in a new layer that's generated. So this is going to make a layer called c-pipe dash whatever my pipe network name is. This is handy with pipe networks because it doesn't make a new layer for every single pipe. Rather, it adds every single pipe on the same layer. Okay, so we could put all pipes and structures on the same layer, or we could do c-pipe dash storm and c-structure dash storm. So that's what we'll end up with when we create this pipe network and the objects in them. Now there's structure labels, there's pipe labels, there's more control as well. But pipe networks are one of the places that, in my opinion, it's nice to have that wildcard turned on. So if we go and create a sanitary network in the same drawing, all those will land on a sanitary layer or a set of sanitary layers, and the storm stuff will land on a set of storm layers. Nice freeze-thaw control to keep our drawing clean while we're working in it. So object layers. Let's go back. Let's make that pipe network. We'll call it storm. We'll grab the storm sewer parts list. Okay, for the surface name, we're going to grab the FG. Another little trick here, I'm not going to go through it in detail, but it's to take your existing and your proposed and make a combined surface. So make an FG plus EG and paste FG second. And what you'll get is a composite surface. Now, you're not going to turn that on, but it's handy when you happen to have a structure that is just outside your finished grade surface, perhaps where you're tying into a sanitary manhole or something like that. It can be nice to have that surface data. And if you make that composite, you'll never have to worry about it. All that surface data will be there. In our case, we're going to draw right on the finished grade surface. On alignment, I'm going to grab this this east-west one. It's called main here. And to start with, we're going to leave the structure labels and pipe labels off. Okay, I'm going to start by dropping in some pipes and structures here. I'm going to grab a 48-inch concentric manhole and some concrete pipe. We'll start with 18-inch. Okay. One thing I want to point out, a lot of folks seem to miss this. This is the flow direction here. So right now the arrow's pointing down. That means as I click along, the slope of the pipes is in the order that I click. So the first click will be upriver, or the high invert. If I toggle this like this, it will be the low invert. So the arrow pointing up, that's more typical for drawing in sanitary. Perhaps the other way, more typical for drawing in storm. So we're going to leave it starting at high invert. It always depends on the project, calls for different things, but that's what this option is here. I'm going to drop in some pipes and structures here. And of course, everywhere I click is where it drops a manhole. So when you're adding perhaps connections here, this is a main line running down the center or perhaps slightly offset from the center, and you want to drop in another piece here. Okay. I can drop this in, and again, you got to be aware of this slope direction here, or this flow direction. So if it's pointing down and I draw this in again, I need to be sure to click here and then connect to that manhole. I could have gone the other way, I just would need to flip my flow direction there. So I'll do the same thing over here, drop in another one. And perhaps one more down here. Okay, so those are all manholes. We want catch basins here. So even though it's the same barrel, we need something to look differently. So I'm going to go into my storm sewer parts list. That's that fourth button. And we're going to start diving into the parts list a little bit and some of the modifications there. If I go to my structures and I go to my concentric structures, you'll see I have a 48-inch and a 72-inch. Okay, I can drop in another size. We'll throw in another 48-inch. And this one, perhaps we'll call it CBMH, so catch basin manhole. And then of course the style here. So let's go in and change this style. Catch basin. So the parts list, if you haven't dove into it much, it basically maps everything. What should be assigned to that part when you drop it in the drawing, okay? So let's take a step back. We have the parts catalog that sits outside of our drawing. When we drop parts in, it pulls from that catalog, and how it styles those parts, that's what the parts list is for. So it says assign this style to it. It says assign this rule set. Okay, we'll touch on a few of these others, a few other ones in a bit here. So when I add that in there and I hit OK, a great way to be managing this is to use a swap part. Okay, so I pick on that manhole and say swap part, and now that catch basin is in there, and that style with a catch basin structure style is associated with it. Okay. Okay, it's also up here as well now. That's CBMH. So that I could draw this in on the fly, like so, and drop in the catch basin there. Okay. So some fairly common use of pipe networks. We'll swap a few other parts here. So the same parts, right? If I grab this manhole, the same, that's catch basin, and we look at it in Object Viewer. Those of you who are not quite as familiar with this, these are both 48-inch manholes, okay? It's just the grate that's different, right? And of course, we need to call that out differently. We want to look at it differently in plan view. That's where that structure style comes into play. And really the only difference, if I go and pick on this and look at the Edit Structure Style option, is that in the plan view, I'm assigning a simple AutoCAD block called catch basin. And this is just out of the box settings here. Let's look at labeling a little bit. Let's put some labels on here and what kind of ramifications we have there. It's not going to appear the way we want. So let's see what we come up with. Let's pick on a structure here. We have add labels and we have add pipe network labels. I get a little floating window here, and we're going to say entire network plan. And for the pipe label, we'll say length, description, and slope. And for the structure label, we'll say data and connected pipes storm. And we'll add that in there. And for the moment, I'm going to pick my pipe labels actually and just delete these. And there's our labels as they come in. So out of the box, these are common things we run into. It says reinforced concrete pipe. Why doesn't it say RCP or something else that I might want? Okay. All this information, the way this is labeled, the way this has appeared, or the way this appears comes from our parts catalog. So all the information here, so not the fact that it says STA for station, that's a label style thing, okay? But the fact that it calls out reinforced concrete pipe, those are the connected pipes. Those are these objects right here. So let's take a look at the parts catalog. Some of these kinds of tweaks. You don't necessarily have to build custom parts and part catalog in the part builder to be able to go in there. You can go in there and make minor tweaks like this. So let's do that once. I'm going to go up here to create design. Let's go to part builder. And if I go to pipe and I have circular pipes, I'm going to grab my concrete pipe. That's one part with multiple sizes. Launch right in a part builder that opens within Civil 3D. Okay, and there's my structure, or excuse me, my pipe. And all I'm going to here is the size parameters. And if I click here where it says MAT for material, I can right click on that and select edit. And here is the culprit. Okay. The way this is labeled in here, reinforced concrete pipe, it's too wordy, right? Might sound picky, but this is an important thing when it comes to fitting a lot of labels on the plan. So let's hit OK, save this part, and close out a part builder right here. Okay. So by the way, when you're kind of playing around with the stuff, be sure to go to your pipe catalog and perhaps save a copy of it before you just start modifying it. And for those of you who don't know, let me just open it up and I'll show you where that's located. See Program Data, Autodesk, Civil 3D, NU, Pipes Catalog. Okay, that's the entire pipe network catalog. Okay, so you can make a copy of that entire thing there, that whole folder, and make a test one, for example. So to refresh this, if I make a change or swap a part, for example, let me grab this pipe, and if I swap this part to perhaps a 15-inch, it's going to reread that catalog, and now that RCP value will come through there. Okay. So the pipe was fine, the way it appeared was fine, it was just the way we were labeling it. So, you know, a common thing is to go right into your label styles and try to modify a lot of this stuff. Okay, try to get it at the source. Try to go to the part catalog through part builder and modify that source when applicable. One of the main things about pipe networks is, you know, they're fairly easy to use for the end user, but it's the customization and the setup that makes that possible. So almost more than any other tool set in Civil 3D, the setup is key with it. And it comes down to customization of that catalog, in many cases duplication of it, a second one or a third one in cases, and we'll touch on that in a bit. Let me just open my slide, make sure I didn't miss anything here. So we'll put this into alignment and profile, we'll edit some slopes and invert, and then we'll also do some of this renaming and renumbering. Okay, so let's jump back in here. So rename or renumber, what does that look like? Okay, that tool, if you pick on a structure, let's grab the structures we want to rename and let's pick them in that order. So I'm going to grab just these manholes right down the center line here. So I'm picking them in this order. And once those four are selected, I can come up here to modify and I have rename parts. And I can rename structures or rename pipes. Let's rename just structures at this point. And I have different ways I can name this, okay? I could say, just type in text, STMH space, and then next counter, or perhaps a dash, a space dash space, and then next counter, put my counter at 1, and here's the key, you have to say rename existing parts so that it starts the count over again. So it's a little tough to see, but this structure down here is something other than 1 right now. Up at the top here it says 4 structures and 0 pipes selected. When I hit OK now, it renames that structure. And I'll see that right in the structure properties. Information tab, STMH1. Okay. So you can rename these in any way you want. Now there's other ways we can handle this. Okay. Let's go back in there again. What if I want to rename the catch basins and the structures, right? Well, if I did it in the way I just did it there, this would be called a storm manhole, when in fact it's a catch basin, right? So while we can come into the structure properties and we can just simply say CBMH 5, for example, and we'll label accordingly. There's more streamlined ways to do this, and you might have noticed it when we went into that rename option. So let's do this one. So let's pick a few of these structures again. So in this order I started catch basin, manhole, structure. If I now go to rename parts, again we'll do rename structures only, and I can go into this name template here. It's this button right here. And instead of just typing in text, I can instead put in part size name and insert that, and then put dash next counter. Okay, so that's the name template there. And by the way, these can all be saved in your DWT file, your Civil 3D templates, so that as users bring this up, like you noticed the first time we did it, it automatically put part size name in there. Okay, so we're going to rename the existing parts again. We're going to start at 1 again. And I hit OK. And it renamed them. So it's got the numbering the way we want, but now it's pulling this variable called concrete cylindrical structure, and it's calling it the same for both of these. So not very helpful, right? Well, when you start to see text like that, that means part catalog. You have options in the part catalog to make this change. So let me go and make one change in there. I'll call this part STMH, so that when we rename it, it automatically pulls it. Okay. So let's go to part builder again. This time we're looking at structure. We're looking at junction structures with frames and concrete cylindrical structure. I'm going to open part builder again. And if I go in to part size name, so that's the value right down here. Again, you don't need to be an expert in part builder to make some of these tweaks. You can come in here, and a lot of times it's just tweaking the appearance of the size parameters values. So pick on part size name, select edit, and right there is the name that it has. Okay. And there's a few other options here. So we have parameter configuration up here. We need to set this to a table instead of a calculation. So that's the type of parameter it is. And just give it a second there, it's hanging up. So different value types have different options. In this case, we just want to set it to table for this demonstration, and then I can go back to my values. And I can perhaps call this STMH. Hit OK. Let's save this and then close out of this again. And so to pull from that part catalog again, we got to do a swap part, or if we drop in another structure. So just as an example, I will swap this to the 72-inch size. And when I have that, actually let's swap it back. Let's swap it back to the 48 so we got the same size. When I have that, now that part size name is STMH, except the structure name itself is a different value. Okay, so structure name is still that. That was automatically populated by the rename renumber tool. Okay, but now that the value or the parameter part size name has STMH in it, we can harness that in our renumber tool. So let's do that again. Pick a couple structures. Rename parts. And again, I'll say part size name dash next counter. Rename the existing structures, and we'll say 1 for the starting point. I hit OK, and now it pulls through STMH. Okay. So what does that mean for this catch basin down here? You want to have it say CBMH. Okay. It has to be a different part in the catalog itself. Okay. Right now, this thing is going to pull STMH had I renamed it because it's still the same part. So I'd have to go in there and modify that. So a lot of what you will do in Part Builder is to do a simple save as a part of a part. That cylindrical structure, we'll edit this, and I can do a save part family as right up at the top here and save this as not the manholes but the catch basins, for example. All the values and parameters will be the same as far as the geometry, but it's just those few values that I want to use for labeling, like part size name. So we do have some other parameters in here that can be used for labeling. It depends on what you're wanting to show on your plan, but this is just kind of touching on what you can do in your part catalog to get things to label properly. So I'm going to close out of that. I wanted to touch on a nice little trick I saw recently about editing pipes. You know, there's a number of ways we can edit the slopes on our pipes. We pick on this, and I have pipe properties. Okay, and in the part properties, I have pipe slope for holding start and end. Okay, that depends on which end I want to move up and down, and I have start elevation for invert and end invert elevation as well. Okay, and you can modify things through there. Okay, we can also pick on any one of the network parts, and we can go to Edit Network. And on the far right here, you have Pipe Network Vistas. This opens up your panorama down here, and here we're going to find pipes and structures. Okay. We also have events. I'm just going to dismiss that. So that's some messages. And then here we can make changes as well to the pipes. But this gets fairly tedious. So what I tell people, use the Vista for doing things like setting the reference surface for all the pipes or all the structures at once. Perhaps you set the wrong alignment, or you didn't set the alignment initially, and now all of these are set improperly. So I could come up here and set all the reference alignments to second Av all at once. Okay, so use the Pipe Network Vistas for these mass changes like this. There's a ton of columns in here, and you can of course right-click on the header and change any of these. Turn them off and on. There's plenty in there that you likely won't care about, so you can turn those off. Okay. The third way, the trick I saw the other, it was a while back actually, is using quick properties, and maybe some of you have used this before. Quick properties is an AutoCAD function where you pick on something and it brings up a little floating dialog box. I pick on a surface and I get this thing. Okay, a lot of us see it and we're really annoyed by it, and we just turn that off, right? This is one of the places where it can be decent. So let me show it to you, and you guys can try it on your own sometime. If I pick on a pipe, I get some properties in here. Okay, and as you notice, I've got start invert elevation, I've got slope and things like that. Out of the box, yours won't quite say it like this, but it's in the CUI, in fact. So if you turn on quick properties, pick on your pipe, and click the CUI button here. Icon looks slightly different in 2014 and 13, but anyway, it's a CUI button, and it launches you into the customized user interface, the CUI, and it throws you right to the quick properties options for that pipe. And here's where we can decide what to display in quick properties. And here you notice I've got slope, invert elevation. Unfortunately, it doesn't have the two slope options where you say hold start and hold end, but you do have some nice options there. So another thing to consider when editing your pipes. So that's quick properties, and that's down here. The icons on the left side in 2014 and previous, they took all these icons and they flipped them over to the right side. It's a significant change, but I think it's for the better actually, how they've reorganized this stuff down there. It gives us a little more drawing space. All right, let's put some of these structures in a profile view. In fact, we're going to take this center line alignment and we're going to project those right to that profile view. So that profile is right up here. And it works a number of ways, okay? What I'm going to do is I'm going to pick the structures I want to draw in profile view. In that case, I'm going to grab this storm line, just the main line here. But I'm not going to grab it all, and you're going to see why in a second. I just grab the two manholes and the pipe there, and then up here I'll have draw parts in profile view. So I'll click that, and then I'm going to go click my profile view. And now these show up in profile view. Okay, once you have a single part in your profile view, you can go to profile view properties and you get a pipe networks tab. So this won't show up until you get at least one part in there. And what we can do now is we can check on and off different pieces, different parts, right? So I can turn on different structures and add them to my profile view. So I'm going to turn on all the structures and all the pipes. And it gets a little messy. So depending on the project, you know, if you have those stub lines, I see many people, they will keep that in there like that. Other times, depending on the project, you don't want to show that, okay? So to get them on a profile view, you can just go back to the properties, or you can just pick on them. When you pick on them here and you delete them, that's just unchecking them in the profile view properties. So if I'm just showing those ones that are in line there, I can delete the ones that are not part of it, okay? So the pipes we have here, got 3 pipes in that line. A couple other things here. How do you get that to show up, right? Out of the box, it doesn't come in, and there's a catch to this. If you go to the structure style and on the display tab, in the profile view, you have to turn on structure pipe outlines. And that's simple enough, but the other part to it is that pipe that you want to see, that one coming out of the page, that has to not be turned on in the profile view. So that's the catch. You have to turn it on here so that it shows it, but also have it not be in the profile view. So that explains why we're not seeing some of these other pipes here. So if I go back in here, let's turn off all pipes. So no pipes are showing. Now I just see the manholes, but now I'm going to see those crossing pipes, and it's actually showing the ones in plane and the ones coming out of the page. There's a lot of different ways to handle this, but I could just come back here now, grab the ones I want to see, 1, 2, and 3, say draw parts in profile view, and now just those 3 pipes are in there, and just the single crossing or out of page pipe is showing up right there, okay? Another thing out of the box, the pipe networks or the structures default to a 2-foot sump, okay? You can go into Part Builder and modify that and reduce that sump to 0. But you can also go right into structure properties, okay? And this is governed by a rule set. When you drop in your part, there's a rule set that governs how it comes in initially, okay? And the out-of-the-box rule set doesn't have this one here, this set sump depth. So let me open that up and show you that. So out of the box, doesn't have set sump depth. So I would come in here, add rule, and grab the set sump depth and set it to 0. Okay. Maybe some of you are aware, I think that 2-foot sump depth for storm, it comes from when we used to collect sediment in our manholes. So most of what we do these days, it doesn't have that sump and storm, but I think that's a holdover. And whoever's putting these tools together, that's where that came from, that 2-foot sump. But it's easy enough to zero out because most of the time we're not trying to trap that sediment. Oops, add rule. Set sump depth. Okay. Hit OK. Apply rules. And it'll pull that invert down. So I still have a floor to my catch basin there, or to my manhole, and that's what that depth is there. But if I pick on the structure and I pick on the pipe, those grips right there, they have the same invert. The pipe is right there. That's the diamond grip. The structure is the triangle grip, same invert. That rule set is governing that. So use rule sets a bit to define default kind of ballpark starting parameters, right? A sump depth of 0. Okay. What other kind of things would you set? Well, let's dive into that parts list again and look at those rule sets. Okay, if it's pipes, for example, okay, larger pipe can go in at flatter slopes. Okay, so we can have, instead of just one rule set here, we can have multiple rule sets. And we can set perhaps a different minimum slope for a 48-inch RCP or a 60-inch RCP that can be a lot flatter, whereas a 12-inch RCP needs more slope on it. Okay, so a fully set up parts list will likely have a whole different, a lot of different rule sets for different pipe sizes. Okay, and the structures, we talked about that a little bit. We've got the sump depth, and there's other values in there as well you can set to govern the invert drop across the structure, a number of things like that. Okay, and all that stuff is specified again in your parts list. This is where you set it so that when you swap part, it pulls that new rule set, it pulls this new style, and so forth. So that's a good thing to shoot for here. Okay, when you're modifying things in your drawing, in your pipes or your structures, if that's supposed to be something different, notice I didn't go to structure properties here and simply change the style on it. Okay, you don't want to do that. You want to have part swapping govern all the properties and styles assigned to that part. Okay, so the kind of modifications you would do in here, maybe part properties changing inverts and that sort of thing. But this type of stuff, the name of it, the description, the styles, let the parts list govern that. Let me drop in one other structure here, one other network. I'm just going to throw in a sanitary network. So we're going to look at crossing pipes for a second. This one I'll call Sanitary. We'll grab our Sanitary parts list. Surface will be FG. And we'll hit OK. And I'm going to grab, again, a 48-inch structure with an 8-inch PVC, and we'll drop this in. I'm just going to put in a couple structures just so we can look at the crossing pipes. Okay. We want to see this crossing pipe show up in our profile view. Pick on the pipe, pick Draw Parts and Profile, and then go pick your profile view. And what we'll see is that pipe shows up here. But what we're actually seeing is that pipe coming in and out of the page or in and out of the screen. Okay. And so what I've seen many folks do is to grab that pipe, go to Pipe Properties, and change the style to Pipe Crossing Sanitary. And when I do that, now I get that crossing style. Okay. But what it does is it turns off my pipe and plan view here. Okay. So the pipe crossing style is only showing in that way. Okay, so the way this is meant to set up, and you can kind of do all sorts of styles chasing, okay? You want to leave that pipe style the same. Leave it at, I think it was single line sanitary. Okay, leave it like that. Instead, what we want is we want a style override in this profile view. You go to Profile View Properties, and now in here I see that sanitary network. Okay, you scroll over to the right here, you have Style Override. This is specific to this profile view. We want to turn that on, and in here, and only in here, are we grabbing the crossing pipe style. And when I do that, it gives me the nice ellipse like I expect to see, and it also keeps my pipe intact on there. So a nice workflow for this. If you have a ton of entangled pipes crossing all over the place, grab all the crossing pipes, project all of them to the profile view, and then come into the profile view properties and set all of them to a pipe crossing override. And then those ones that don't cross won't show up. It's a nice foolproof way if you're in real kind of dense urban situations where you've got lots of underground pipe crossings. Some of you might have noticed the way this appears here. Why is that looking like that? And I'm going to have to email you guys because there's this really odd system variable and it escapes me at the moment. But you're not stuck with that is the point I want to make. There's a system variable, and it's really goofy. I got to look it up again, that dictates the tessellation of that pipe crossing. Okay, so I'll be sure to get that to you guys. And what we're actually seeing here is it's showing both inside and outside wall of pipe. So if I go in here, go to display in the section view, and show perhaps just inside. I'll try that one more time. Edit pipe style, section, sorry, profile view, crossing, outside wall. There it is, a regen. Okay. So when you want more detail than that, it's this system variable, and I should have written it down. It's there. I promise it's there. Let me jump back to my slide here. So we talked about a number of designing options with pipe networks, editing slopes, alignments and profiles, the sump, and crossing pipes, how you handle that stuff. And we dabbled in parts catalog and parts lists. Okay, so parts catalog modifications. We looked at pipe material, changing it so it reads something different. Okay, we talked about structure, part size, name. There's quite a bit to that, and we don't have time to deep dive into everything on that, but that's a nice parameter in the structure that you can use to label and table things the way you want. And the parts list, okay, so this is that go-between. A parts list is like a style. It sits in your template, okay, and it's really just kind of a mapping. It's telling Civil 3D what catalog parts to grab. And what to map in there. And someone they sent me that system variable. Let me go back there. We got to do it now. The yeah, face. I can drop this system variable down. It was at 0.5. Okay. I put it to 0.1. Let's even go 0.05, for example. You can really see the difference here. Okay, so we get much more of an ellipse there. Okay, so do it to the extent you need it, right? Do a test plot. How detailed does it need to be? And go with it there, you know, because once you get line weights plotting on this, it's gonna, you know, it doesn't need to be perfect. The parts list, again, set it up so it is controlling everything, and what that means is that you have to do part catalog modifications, okay? When you bring parts into the parts list, when I'm in here and I'm editing my parts list and I bring in another size, right? I'm on my structures here and I say add part size, that's now diving into the catalog, okay? So all this stuff, the way this is named in your parts list, you don't want concrete structure or concentric structure 4824, all that stuff is coming from the part catalog itself, okay? That happens to be a large formula in the part catalog itself telling it to call out the diameter, the frame size, all that sort of stuff. Couple other things on parts list. Style assignment. Okay, it's key that you assign those styles in there. And multiple parts catalog. I just want to touch on this a little bit. I know some of my clients out there do this, and it's a little tedious to set up, but once you get it in place, it makes it very useful. And the situation is, what about when I have an existing structure and I want that to show up in profile view, right? An existing sanitary you want to tie into. Okay. In order to have that be controlled through the parts list, we need to be able to swap a part. Well, if you want it the same size as perhaps its proposed structure counterpart, you can't have two sizes in the parts list under the same family. Okay. So what it means is you make duplicate catalogs. Okay, you make these modifications the way you want, then you duplicate them. Okay, and you change some of those material values in there, the part size name and such. And then you can pull that information through. You can assign different styles, then you can assign different different options, different rule sets, all sorts of things in there. And it's sounds like a little bit of a pain, but that is the answer to having existing structures and to be able to access those just through the swap part option. So you could even have a third catalog, and that might be a future catalog. So proposed, existing, and future. I want to touch on a couple other things, and we do have a couple questions showing up that we'll try to touch on. And if we can't address them right in the webinar here, we will definitely reach out to you and send you an email or give you a ring and help you out with that. So a few other things, the part mapping to storm and sanitary analysis. I just want to touch on that, and also staking of pipe networks. How do you handle that? So back into Civil 3D here. When you grab a pipe network and you want to run an analysis on it in storm and sanitary analysis, okay, you pick on a structure, you have that option right here, edit in storm and sanitary analysis. And I'll just click this and I'll just let it push it right to SSA. So it automatically opens SSA. We'll see that show up in a second here. And it basically does an overlay, or like an XREF of our drawing, and then it takes our pipe network and it converts it into storm and sanitary analysis pipe and structure objects. And so looking over here, I zoom in, I'll see that same DWG basically referenced back there, and now I have a SSA catalog here, okay, and so here's that catch basin, that inlet, okay. What dictates what kind of structure it gets in here, because this is different, it's not the exact same structure we have, these are mapped to different parts. But to make this fairly seamless, you have to say what is mapped to what. And so what that looks like back in Civil 3D, if you go to your settings tab and you go to your pipe network feature settings, you have storm sewers migration defaults. And if I click here, part matching defaults, I get a part matchup settings dialog box and with two tabs, import and export. So the import, this is when the export, this is when I'm going from Civil 3D to SSA. And I have a list of all the parts in my catalog here, the part types, and what storm sewers part or what SSA part it would go to. Then I have the reverse. When I'm coming back from SSA, what Civil 3D structure does it go to? Okay, so these are saved in your template once again. What about staking pipe networks? Okay, if it's just the structure center you're after, okay, if you just want to be able to stake that center of barrel, okay, on Toolbox tab you have reports, you have pipes, and you have structures in CSV, okay, and I can push these out and it'll spit it out to a CSV, and I can delete some columns and things like that, and I'll have a point file I can then stake. But what it takes is it takes the barrel center, northern and eastern, and it takes the rim invert elevation, or excuse me, the rim elevation, not the invert elevation. Okay. Excuse me, and it also gives you the sump elevation, so you do have the invert there. But what if you need to stake more than that? What if you need to be staking along the pipe, for example? Okay, you could take these and you could create, a line in your data collector, for example, between the two parts. But what may work a little nicer is for you to draw that profile in. So I see a number of people doing this. And what this is to create a design profile. So profile creation tools, we'll call it storm invert. And I'm going to drop this in here. So it can be a little bit tedious, but it's nice in that you do the work right in here. Okay, and at this point I'm just picking on the edge of the pipe as it comes into the structure. Okay, and then you kind of need to tweak it a little bit more. So you may, you have to connect to those pipes so that you can stake anywhere along that profile. But if you want to be staking that invert on that structure, well, I got to put in another PVI here. Okay, and kind of the trick here is if you pick on the structure and pick on the layout profile, I have the two grips here. So there's my bottom invert, and I can use the grips there to snap to that. Okay. Now as the surveyor, I can toggle through those three locations there, and I can stake invert of the structure, and I can also go anywhere along that profile. Okay. So I can export this to XML. Okay, with the Trimble link add-on, for example, I can export to an RXL file. That'll take an alignment and a profile, and it's fairly foolproof for that that surveyor staking this then. So there's a couple of questions about object enablers, and they get fairly involved. They're a little bit off topic, so we'll address those after the fact. But there was a question about, is there a Civil 3D schema that documents how these tables and catalogs interact? Kind of, sort of, not really. There's some documentation out there, but there isn't anything all that extensive or necessarily up to date. So it's, what I say it depends on how much modification you need to do in there. The basics of it is you have a part catalog that sits in your C program data folder. Okay, when you draw in a structure or a pipe that's coming from a parts list, that parts list just maps it to the part catalog. Okay, and that part catalog can sit on the network, it can sit anywhere. In fact, if I jump back to Civil 3D here, here's my set pipe network catalog option right here. Okay, so that sits in C program data, but obviously we could put that on the network for all to use the same customized catalog. The interaction you want to go for, like I say, as much as possible, you want to be able to swap parts from one item in the parts list to another item, because that parts list is always retrieving from the catalog. When you're doing changes like I'd said, just picking on the structure and going to the structure properties, that's not pulling from the catalog, and you want that stuff to pull from the source. It's another question, is there a way to raise, lower an entire pipe network at once? And I assume you mean keep the rims at the same location, but lower the entire thing down, or maybe it's lower the absolutely everything down. There is no raise lower option for all that. It's a little more tedious. Of course, you could, if it was just rims you were trying to bring down, you could of course create a different surface, paste in the original surface into it, and do a raise lower on that surface. And then you could change the reference surface on all those structures, and that would push the rims down. If you reapplied rules to pipes and such, it would push those down, but it wouldn't be an even thing. So unfortunately, there's no easy button there that I know of. We got one more question here that someone just sent in. Is there a way to use the Apply Rules button or option to keep the 0.1 invert drop by modifying the uphill pipe? No, it's kind of messy. If I follow what you're asking, it's a little tricky. But go ahead and email in and let me look at your specific situation, and maybe we can figure out a better way to do it. Thanks everyone for watching. Again, this stuff will be recorded. It's on YouTube, and these are meant to be just kind of little where we dabble into things here and there, give you guys tips and tricks, maybe bring a few things to your attention you weren't aware of. But yeah, so it will be posted on YouTube that you can share with some of your coworkers. Otherwise, let us know about some more in-depth information. We do training and all sorts of support on this stuff at all different levels. So let us know how we can help you guys. With that, thanks a lot for tuning in, and we'll see you guys next time.